Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Each week we talk about heart rate variability and how it can be used to improve your overall health and wellness. Please consider the information in this podcast for your informational use and not medical advice. Please see your medical provider to apply any of the strategies outlined in this episode. Heart Rate Variability Podcast is a production of Optimal LLC and Optimal HRV. Check us out at optimalhrv.com. Please enjoy the show. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I am Matt Bennett, here with my good friends, Dr. Dave Hopper, Dr. Ina Hazan. We are here to further our conversation about the heartbeat of business. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome. We are so glad you're here. And we'd love for you to stop this episode and go back to episode 1 of this series. You might be a little lost if you don't. We are going through the audiobook version of the Heartbeat of Business and talking about each chapter as we're going through the book. So if you jump in now, you can listen, see if you like us, but really encourage you to go back to chapter 1 or episode 1 of this series. So you, when you get to this episode, you will feel like it makes a little bit more sense. So I'm really excited to talk about engagement today. This is where I really saw the job demands and resource model really when we talk about stress and business outcomes, performance outcomes, engagement really fit into both heart rate variability and this model in a great way. So Dave, I know you have a question for me to start us out today, so I will turn it over to you to host.
Well, thank you, Matt. So as we dig into this next chapter, we want to throw the question at Matt of how does that relationship work between engagement and heart rate variability? So what are we looking at there, Matt? How engaged somebody is in any given task and how that correlates with heart rate variability?
Absolutely. So again, and you've got these printouts on the our website, so you can download the book for free. If you haven't done that, just the visuals can be a really good resource for you. But if you look at the top line of the job demands and resources model, really on one hand, we're measuring the stress response. And as we've talked about throughout the series, as the book has talked about, if the stress overwhelms my personal resources and the resources given by the organization, that's where I hit burnout. So that top line, and that's where we get negative business outcomes. That top line, HRV gives us a really good measure for how is my team doing today? How is my team doing this month? How are we doing since this new initiative around employee wellness happening? Then we have the bottom line, which again, I really think if we do a good job of the top line, it provides, and this is a little bit of my language, I'll own that, the opportunity for engagement to happen. And if we're burned out, we're likely to struggle with engagement. That's what the model shows us. I don't think I'm breaking any news to anybody. If we're burnt, we're not as engaged in our work. We're not as excited about our work. So as leaders, as managers, as teammates, when we're able to succeed at creating a healthy worker, a healthy us, a healthy team, then we have the capacity for engagement. And that is really where we start out with this chapter, looking at once we've done that, we have the engagement piece. And this is where I would love to bring in and give credit to the Gallup 12. This is the Gallup Q12 has been, if there's been one piece of research that guided my thinking as a business person, as a leader, as a manager, since I've picked up First Break All the Rules in 1999, their first book, it's been the Gallup 12. And there's these, and we outline these in the book. I'm going to ask you some of my favorites on here and why you think they apply to engagement. But this is Gallup's done this huge research study, these 12, and they used to be questions. They reframed these, which I love as a therapist, into statements. They've kept the Q, I just think, for fun. But it really gives us, if you think about heart rate variability measures the health and wellness of the organization. In other words, that top line of the job demands resources model I really think, and I'm not rocket science to come up with this, that the Gallup Q12 measures the bottom line. So how well are we doing really engaging our workforce, getting motivated, getting them really on that activation line, as we talked about in our last conversation, where there is that activation, that energy mixed in with that ventral vagal break. So energy plus executive functioning is going to most often not lead to good performance. So, I know most people have read or listened to the chapter. So, I want to put out here some of my favorite questions. And I want from an HRV perspective, I'd love to get your thoughts. I'll start you out with this one because it is by far my favorite of all time. Is one of the Gallup 12 is I have a best friend at work. So I love this because I was in grad school. I was in my MBA program when this came out. So it was fun for me because I'm like, I'd ask all my professors, like, especially the accounting folks, like, why is having a best friend improve my financial outcomes? And they would go into a seizure and, not want to talk to me ever again. So, let me throw it out to you. Why do you think the best friend at work is so important?
Well, I think primarily because our social support is one of our primary ways of coping with stress. And given how much time we spend at work and how many challenges come our way, having a natural way of coping with stress right there built in is really helpful. Right? We know that there is a strong correlation between social engagement and heart rate variability, right? We know that oxytocin that we talked about at one of our previous episodes, which is technically a stress hormone, but it gets released in response to being in touch with other human beings or other beings. Here I'm assuming we're talking about human best friends.
Yes.
All sorts of good things happen when we're able to connect with a supportive, kind, compassionate person right there in the workplace without having to wait until we get home to talk to a partner or someone else, or without having to make a phone call.
Yeah, and this is one of the ones where I think it's how well we do setting up a healthy culture, because I've also seen best friends at work. Sometimes we call this, it might be a little bit over dramatic for this situation, but I've actually seen it in some real dysfunctional places I've worked, that we can also trauma bond with each other. So if we're in a very dysregulated, unhealthy workplace, my best friend is going to be my support to either try to just keep ourselves safe within the organizational system or to fight management. So, it's an interesting double-edged sword that we kind of have to be aware of as managers, is that bond is actually a good thing. And no, you're not in the business of creating best friends, but I mean, I love working with both of you. Every time, we have our meetings or, individual or as a group, I get really excited because they're some of my favorite times of the week, because get to catch up on all the great work Ina's doing and all the trainings Dave's doing. And it's just like so much fun for that as well. I mean, you two are some of my biggest motivators, my biggest sources of engagement as we do work at Optimal as well. So Dave, I'm going to give you another one because I know you kind of oversee teams and that as well. Is my supervisor or somebody at work seems to care about me as a person? Why should I care about you as a person, Dave? Well, what's going on here?
Well, I that is just that should go without saying, right? Feeling cared about, knowing that somebody cares about you, knowing that somebody loves you, that is one of the most important things that we can have. I talk about a way to avoid depression. Surround yourself with people that love you, that you share a positive bond with in some way. And granted, we know there's different levels of love, right? Right. Like I can love you guys as my different love than what I have for my wife, right, or my kids. But absolutely, if I go into work and I feel like I am not appreciated by my supervisor, am I going to want to do a good job for that person? Number one. And number two, am I going to be looking forward to going into work, or am I going to be dreading going into work?
Right.
Those are huge factors. When I know that when I come in, there's going to be a smiling face, there's going to be somebody to greet me, somebody to say, "Hey, Dave, you did a great job yesterday on XYZ, and just wanted to give you a high five for that." Right? Or somebody who even just asks, "Hey, how was your weekend?"
Right.
Rather than straight to, "Hey, you messed up whatever last week, and we need to get your story straight here," whatever, whatever it may be. There are times where, as a supervisor, you need to be strict, but showing gratitude, showing appreciation, showing that as a supervisor you care about your workers, that is of the utmost importance, or they won't want to show up, they won't want to do a good job, they will not be engaged.
Right.
All they'll be thinking about is, what time is it, how soon till I leave, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. This one, like the most powerful piece of Gallup that I've seen, and I'll be honest with you, as a trainer, I almost want this to be every other slide in my leadership trainings. It's that important. I don't know where to put it. Like, do I put it in the engagement section? It seems to be too late. So I want to like bring it up, but then it's like, it's about engagement. But the research that I just find fascinating is the number one predictor of engagement is whether or not your leader, your manager, your supervisor cares about you as a human being. That is the where, in many ways, the Gallup Q12 is sort of won or lost when we talk about it. Doesn't somebody care about you? Does your well-being matter to your leadership? And that's not something you get in a lot of traditional business books. Now, that has shifted. It's kind of fun to be old sometimes, because you get to watch trends shift over time, where like, oh, we're just all cogs of this machine, this behavioralist sort of approach to a factory like assembly line. And what we've really found is like, it's about being somebody caring about your well-being. And so that's where I think where I struggle with where to put this is, that should really be when we talk about providing resources to folks. That's where they need to feel that on the top line as well, right? So in some ways, feeling cared about as a human being, me as a manager cares about your wellness, should really be also seen as a resource, but also allows you to shift into that engagement as well. And I guess a question for both of you, Ina, I might start with you to kind of wrap this short follow up to the chapter up is, as a manager, I think we get pulled. On one hand, we got to get people to perform, especially as kind of, we're in this environment where you hear about layoffs, productivity, we got to care about money again. Got to show up to the office because now, the organization has a little bit more power. How would you look at balancing high performance and showing someone you care about their well-being? Because I think those don't necessarily have to be conflictual, but I think I need you to work this weekend. I need you to work an overnight tonight to get this project done. I think that there is a struggle for a lot of supervisors is, well, I just can't sit around tell them how much I love them all the time. I need them to get work done. I just kind of wonder if you have any thoughts on how we balance those things as leaders or supervisors.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. I'm going to echo what Dave said a few minutes ago. When you've set up a relationship with with the people that work for you, that's based on seeing them as people, that's based on kindness and understanding and support, those people will be so much more likely to respond positively to extra requests. I really need you to work this weekend, right? If you are asked that by a supervisor who is generally mean and unpleasant and non-supportive, it's going to be really tough for you to say yes to that.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a supervisor that's kind and validates your efforts and recognizes them, and you'll feel seen by that person, it's going to be so much more acceptable to say, you know what, yes, I will do you a favor. I will do this thing. I will sacrifice my weekend.
Yeah.
So I think in large part, it's the kind of relationship that you set up from the very beginning. And no, you can't always sit around, telling everybody how much you love them. But that's the case in your family as well, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, we love our kids and we want to just sit around telling them how much we love them, but sometimes we have to enforce some discipline, and sometimes we have to put in place consequences, and it sucks, but we have to, right? It's
Yeah.
for their well-being. And if the foundation of the family relationship is one of trust and attachment and safety, then
Yeah.
we can do that, right? Then, the consequences become a learning experience. In a similar way, with our work family, right? If we set up a relationship that's safe and mutually supportive and validating, where people feel seen, then you can provide criticism, constructive criticism. You can say, you know what, this didn't work out the way I was hoping it would work out, and I think this could have been done better, and I'm wondering what got in the way of you being able to get this project done on time.
Yeah.
But all of that is much more likely to go smoothly when there is a foundation of trust.
I love it. I love it. And really looking at that, like we've already spent time thinking about the supervisor, the manager, the leader as a resource, as a person. And this is where I have trouble figuring out where this slide goes. Like, because on one hand, I want to cover the trust, the psychological safety, the honesty before I get to this slide. And yet, like I said, I want it to also be the title of my entire presentation, because it's something that we know, like only 10% of people, according to Gallup, see themselves as a vital asset to the organization. I think 50% stated, my supervisor doesn't care about my well-being at all. And I'm working mostly with nonprofit healthcare people. None of the data says we do any better. We should know better, but it doesn't mean it necessarily translates into our leadership style. So that's really that big piece that we do. Dave, I just throw that question to you too, balancing that high performance, which is often like pushing people with that caring about their well-being.
Yeah, it's a very difficult balance because you can easily tip the other way too, where somebody sees you friend than they do as a supervisor.
Yeah.
And then when you do make an request, like, no, dude, I can't do that. I'm going to this party this weekend, and that's way more important, and so you don't want to tip that balance too far to the other direction, and it does get tricky to maintain we're friendly and I do genuinely care about you, but we still have to get this work done. And I love the way that Ina stated her way to support somebody and her way to ask what happened. Asking a question like that is so much better than saying, dude, this up. You suck, right? Like, we can't say that, or people aren't going to be happy about it. So, but we can say, what was going on here? Was there something happening at home that interfered with work? Is there some way that I can help support you in doing a better job? What got in the way here? And that is so important, to always be there to support them in one way or another, and especially as we deal with the younger generations coming into the workforce, that has been a very tricky spot for us professionals. Is that you have to really validate what they are doing and really show that you care before you can ever ask a question or a favor. So that's been that as well has been different, because when our parents, our bosses, it was quite a bit different than we talk to
we talk about recognition in this chapter as well, and I think you bring up a good point, and something I'm hearing more and more in my trainings is like, why don't people just show up and do their jobs? And it's so funny being a Gen Xer, because we were supposed to be like the downfall of Western culture. Like we never got off the couch. All we did was wear flannel. I'm still a little worried my jeans are too baggy to be socially appropriate. I'm really struggling with this right now because everybody makes fun of Michael Jordan's baggy jeans, and I'm like, oh, they should see my jeans. They're really baggy. Like, yeah, like, so it's like, so being older, it's one of those good things. It's like, oh, we were that generation, not too long ago. And I believe I'm the oldest one on this call too. So I get that designation as the old man on the podcast. So, but it's interesting because we've got, especially in a time of high burnout, high stress, we all know that we have a negative bias, right? So human beings are designed to really pay more attention to the negative than the positive is sort of our default setting, and that's kept us alive, right? If we want to maybe, what's the saying? It's better to run away from a stick thinking it was a snake than pick up a snake thinking it was a stick. So if we err a little bit on the negative, it's been a really good thing for us overall. But if you add a whole bunch of stress to an environment, it just reinforces that negative bias. And so I think what the Gallup Q12 really tells us in many ways is, how do we offset that? And that's where recognition is a balance. And this brings in some of the growth mindset research from Carol Dweck is, as leaders really focusing on specific behaviors. I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you what a great person you are. That is not what we're talking about with caring about somebody's well-being. It's recognizing certain behaviors and sort of shifting the bias, more looking for the positives in the system instead of the negatives, because there will always be negatives there. And the more stress we get, and Ina, if I'm correct here, or if you got any other research, I'm assuming the more stress we get, the more the negative bias becomes. So using some of these strategies to really help off-shift that, I think can be really powerful and necessary in today's world too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think another point, excuse me, to add here is that when we get stressed, we're much more likely to fall back on old habits, which include that negative bias, right? Because that's built in. That's as old as it gets. And even if we've learned some different strategies, when we get really stressed, we still fall back onto the old habits. So I think it shows just how important it is to be setting up positive coping strategies as early as possible, so that those have a greater chance of becoming more dominant strategies. So when things get really stressful, we're just a little bit less likely to fall back onto the old ones.
Absolutely. Great point. The final piece that I want to do is, I have been thinking about this a lot in industries that are just in absolute crisis right now. And I would throw healthcare, social services, education as systems that might not be sustainable. When you look at what's happening, we knew there was going to be a nursing shortage. It's hit us now. People are just having trouble staffing or paying triple the rate to get staff, and so we've hit this. And I've been thinking a lot about, okay, how do we tangibly show this? And one of the things that I've really challenged people is, most people hopefully have like an employee assistance program where they offer free therapy sessions for folks. And, so if I'm struggling with something personally, I think it's totally appropriate for a supervisor to say, hey, we have this great resource. Here's the information. I encourage leaders to reach out and know what that system's like themselves. So it kind of takes the stigma away from accessing it to leaders out there. So, hey, I called up. It took me 2 weeks to get in, but it really helped me overcome some issue that I was dealing with. I just think that's a really good message to give. But so many people right now, one of their stresses or even traumas have been from the work that they've been doing and going through the pandemic. That's just put a lot of stress in people's cups, so to speak. And so think about the difference of what we're talking about here. Instead of saying, hey, we have this resource, and if you choose to engage in it, we're going to give you time at work to engage in virtual therapy. So we're going to actually pay you to overcome the burnout and process the burnout with a therapist. One is showing, yeah, we care about you. Two is saying, we really care about you. And I don't have any data to say one approach gets you increases your profit margin by 1%. But I think in a time of extreme burnout that we're in right now in a lot of industries, looking for those ways to say, hey, I don't want to only use your vacation time like we talked about, but I'm going to give you a half day on Monday so you don't have to worry about all those emails until you get back. And we're going to give you time to catch up on that. So I would really encourage leaders right now, be aggressive with this. Again, still, we're not eliminating expectations. Those are so crucial. That's going to get us on that peak elevation of, yep, we got the energy, but we got the ventral vagal activation as well. But again, showing people that we care and going above and beyond right now is so key. So
absolutely. Can I add one thing to that?
Please do.
I think very much in line with this, there is some data floating out there that people are much more likely to leave managers than they are to leave jobs.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, it just shows you how important it is, as a manager, as a leader, to show people that you care about them, because when they feel seen, when they feel, supported, validated, et cetera, when they feel important, they're going to be much less likely to want to get away from you, right? So, as far as data goes, retention, right? And this day and age, worker retention is key. You're going to be retaining good people with much higher, much higher percent.
Absolutely.
Success.
And we know that turnover usually costs about 9 months' salary of that position to get a new person hired and up to speed. So an hour a week for a couple weeks to engage in therapy to overcome their burnout, very small investment. Very small investment. Dave, you got any other thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, you know what? Something cool that my mom actually said to me when I was very young. She said to me that you can choose to be happy or you can choose to be mad, and she said and you can choose to like somebody or you can choose to have something good about every person. And she goes, if you just choose to see the good thing about each person, you'll always be happy. And it's funny because when you start to apply that and you just don't even realize that it's happening, right? It's just become who you are. You always choose to see the positive about people. You always choose to see something nice, and a happy, good, positive person to be around. And I just, it's never too late to start that habit of seeing the good, of seeing the positive. Because I know you were talking about the negative earlier, so I wanted to toss that in there as well.
I think that's a great way to wrap us up today, my friend. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Obviously, at this point of our journey, you can download the book for free at optimalhrv.com with this. So I want to thank you for joining us. We will get the next chapter out next week, and we'll be in your feed soon. So everybody have a wonderful day. We will see you next week.
Bye, everyone.